Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. I am Tony Gerdeman, here sometimes with Kevin Noon. Kevin, how's it going?
It's going well. It's going well. Greetings to everybody watching us on YouTube. Greetings to those of you catching us on Facebook. We are simulcasting, just doing some testing, seeing how things are looking on both platforms. So if you are watching us on the Book of Faces, you can support us by sending stars. I'm reading this right off the script. Stars help me earn money, make more content, or buy beer, or both, or Zima if you're Tony Gerdeman. But thank you to everybody who's watching us on any platform. And Jordan Kapler will just get this in. The obligatory boo Kevin. Come 2024, it's going to be the year of Tom Orr, and maybe I can slide back into anonymity.
There you go. That's the best case scenario right there. Just no feelings about you whatsoever. And not that anybody's going to ask. Tom may or may not be here today. So I just want to get that out there in case one person was wondering. And Jordan, of course, wanted to let Jordan know because obviously he is not happy right now. But we are live. As Kevin said, it's a Friday. So basically, whenever we go live, you guys know that the show, the responsibility is up to you. We're only going to do so much in terms of show prep because, again, it's Friday. And we're going live so that you guys can help us out with the stuff to talk about. But there is, Kevin, there are some things to talk about coming up in the next week. Mainly some commitments, some guys to watch, being Marcus Lightfoot, the defensive end, deciding on a third,
Lockhart,
and we just talked about this before the show, deciding on the sixth, the quarterback out of Arizona. I think we decided those are the only two coming up this week. How do you feel about Lightfoot at this point?
It's funny. I was talking to a friend of mine who covers Illinois, and he was trying to list all of the reasons why Lightfoot could pick Illinois. And I said alien abduction and, Marvel Cinematic Universe are not necessarily good reasons for why this could happen. It's Ohio State by a huge lead, in my opinion. I think Notre Dame is probably the second hat that would be there. I like Ohio State on that one. And then when it comes to Miles Lockhart, the athlete, presumably defensive back out of Arizona, I don't normally push all of my chips in when it comes to recruiting, but I'm willing to push all of my chips in there. I don't feel that he has done necessarily a huge job to make it really dramatic, so I'm not ruining anybody's moment there, but I feel very strongly it'll be Ohio State.
Well, and we've seen the Ohio State commits themselves being pretty bullish on Twitter of late. But yeah, Marquise Lightfoot, 6'5", 220-pound defensive end out of Chicago, the number 67 player on the 24/7 composite. As we know, the Buckeyes need to get as many defensive ends as they can. They kind of struck out a little bit last year, ended up with Joshua Mickens, but we're in on three of the top guys nationally. Once again, they are in on some of the top guys nationally. So however that shakes out, it would be good to get Lightfoot in the fold. Miles Lockhart, a smaller corner, 5'10". I wouldn't be surprised if he ends up in the slot. Plays out in Arizona. We'll have to play some running back this year as well for his team to help them out. But a guy that Ohio State has been in on for a while, and he's liked them for a while. They've liked him for a while, and he's a 4-star, but whenever he gets talked about with all the other guys that Ohio State was in on for a while, including Aaron Scott and Bryce West, you had so many Buckeye fans wondering, is Lockhart a take? And all along, I think everybody at Buckeye Huddle has been saying, yes, he's definitely a take. And we'll find out on the 6th if Ohio State is a take for him.
Right, exactly. And then one other name that we didn't talk about beforehand, and I don't necessarily have a lot of great information on this one. I think it's on the 2nd. Ryan Nichols out of Cincinnati will be making his announcement. I think Ohio State really needs to, and I'm going to get to the super chats here in a second. I think Ohio State really needs to replenish the room. There was some time under Taylor Johnson where the recruiting just didn't necessarily go to where Ohio State wanted it. There's been maybe a little bit of some developmental issues. I mean, you lose J.K. Johnson to the transfer portal to LSU. I think that loading up at corner is not a bad thing. We look, just go back to last year. Go back and see. I mean, pretty much everybody but Ryan Watts got thrust out there in one way, shape, or form due to depth, due to injury, everything else. At this point, I'm not quite sure that I see Ryan Nichols in the class, but if something were to fall apart along the way, I think he's somebody you could circle back to. But we still need to talk about Aaron Scott, but we have 3 super chats
Oh, geez.
in the
Okay.
queue right now. So we're going to just start in chronological order with Yakov 22. Is AI the next Skynet? Ever been to an indie home game? I'm trying to figure out how to put these together. I mean, come with me if you want to live.
Well, I would say there is a lot of artificial intelligence at most Notre Dame home games, if you will. I have never been there. I'm looking forward to it. I've driven past, very, very past it. So I'm definitely looking forward to getting there. I do believe there's some concern with the AI and Skynet, although I don't believe it will necessarily be robots taking over. I believe that some nefarious people, as there are always nefarious people, will garner control, render all of the rest of the citizenship, powerless in our struggle for humanity. And so I would give that. I'm hoping within maybe we got another 2 weeks before all of this happens, Kevin. And I will say this: I don't know what it means. I had a dream last night. There was a little bit of a zombie outbreak, and not a big one, but enough for the neighborhood to be concerned. And we had about like 15 people bunkered in at our house. And as all of this was going on, my one thought was, I wonder if this is going to impact the college football season.
You should have podcasted about it in your dream. You could have done a podcast in the dream, and then we could have had some sort of inception thing going on. And I also do want to point out, as we're talking about nefarious characters, no Tom Orr here. So you do the math on that one. He could be planning Skynet. I don't know.
Have you ever been to South Bend?
I have driven through it. When I was still a student at Ohio State and my parents had moved to Chicago and I was making the long haul between Chicago and Columbus to go get laundry done, to be able to go eat decent food, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, I try and break up the drive, the monotony of it. And one year I decided, okay, well, I'm just going to get off of 80 in South Bend, near South Bend, and take 33 all the way down. Well, I did that once, and I will never do that again. That was by far taking a drive that kind of sucks to begin with and making it extra sucky. But I did see the Golden Dome as I was driving by. I mean, again, if I was in college, these were the dark ages. My horses were spooked a little bit, but we eventually made it.
I don't know why. Probably I assume the cost. I was in college in '96 when Ohio State went to Notre Dame, but we did not bother going to that game.
Next super chat from Ryan Dawes. I know you guys have talked about Sonny Styles a lot recently, but I saw a picture of him next to 2 DEs, and it was looking like 3 DEs. Does he really play safety ever again? Or as Jericho would say, again.
Again, but we are not Canadians here. We are Americans. Have you seen the picture, Kevin? Because and one of the guys I believe is Jason Moore, who is listed at 6'6" and 295 pounds. But I think that I don't think that 6'6" is quite legit, because Sonny Styles looks just a smidge taller. But Sonny Styles himself is listed right now in OSU's directory as 6'4", 228 pounds. So he's like what Craig Powell was back in like 1994 or whatever, when he was an outside linebacker at Ohio State, and he was running around very fast and was a playmaker. And will he play safety, Kevin? We've talked to Jim Knowles, and he said he was impressed by how well he played at all 3 different safety spots: the free safety, the strong safety, and a nickel. So I foresee him being a strong safety, and when he plays the nickel, it'll be more of a, for me, in my opinion, like a Sam. And I think Jim Knowles even said more of a strong safety type as a nickel, not unlike what we saw against Georgia, which I consider that to be a Sam linebacker more than a safety or a nickel.
Yeah, I'm not going to get too caught up on labels of what the position is per se. Oh, you have the Viper, you have the Leo, you have the whatever. You could name it, you could name it the Bugs Bunny. It doesn't really matter at that point. It's, are you one of the 11 out there? I mean, of course, we can sit there and say, are you playing in the first level on the line? Are you playing in the second level? Are you playing in the third level? Seeing the picture of Sonny Styles, I'm gonna let him play kind of wherever the hell he wants to, because you got to get him out there on the field. So, I understand the spirit of Ryan's question and all. I'm more of the mindset of just how many snaps a game are you going to be able to get him out there? How are you going to be able to get that framework put together to get him out there? I mean, the goal always is to get your best 11 out there. And Ohio State certainly has some dudes that I feel are pretty locked in their spots. But if Sonny Styles isn't approaching being in that conversation for best 11, I mean, kid can flat out play, and he certainly is. I'm making sure he's one of the first ones off the bus just to intimidate people.
And what I really think is his strength is he can play from snap to snap, and the offense can go from 12 personnel to 11 personnel, and Sonny Styles can move up, down the line, move off the line of scrimmage, move closer towards it. He has that kind of versatility where he can defend different aspects of the field. And as I've suggested, I'm okay with getting rid of labels. I would just give him one label and just call it the Sonny position or the Sonny backer or whatever you want, because he's going to be doing many different things. And then good luck trying to replace that. But I mentioned this on the message board, the Buckeye Huddle message board today, and somebody mentioned that you've got to have your 5 best guys out there in the secondary. And for me, you're trying to play 15 games, so you want 8 or 9 of those guys to be in the secondary. You don't want the same 5 guys playing the entire time, because they'll be worn down by the time you get to Michigan and then the Big Ten championship game, and then if you're lucky enough to make the playoffs. So I think you've got to do some substitutions, and that will help get him on the field. And sometimes he's coming in for Lathan Ransom. Sometimes he's coming in for the nickel. Sometimes he's going to be coming in for a defensive tackle, because they're going to go to like a 3-3-5 or something. They'll be able to do some different things and replace him with use him to replace a bunch of different guys, I think, and that will help build up his snap numbers.
One last thing before we get to Glass Wing Super Chat. I mean, yeah, I agree that you do have to have the depth there because it's a long season. Ohio State's open week is early in the year. I mean, it's at the end of September, so you're not getting it mid-October. You're not, of the 12-game regular season, you're not playing 6 and then getting your open week and then doing 6 on the back end. It's not set up like that. But conversely, if Ohio State is going to be a big favorite in a lot of its games, the hope is that in the fourth quarter that all of your starters are on the bench and everything else. So that was always kind of an issue I had with the defensive line rotation. Well, we got to keep these guys fresh. I said, for what? For sitting on the bench for the last 20 minutes of the game, for 5 minutes of the third and the entire fourth. I mean, there needs to be a good happy medium there of where you're getting guys experience, where you're not getting to the end of a season and looking at next year and being like, God, we have nobody who has any reps, or at least any meaningful reps. But conversely, football players got to play football, so you got to get these guys some reps when you can.
But we also know Ryan Day has been reticent to put in backups in blowouts on the offensive side. I think it's incumbent upon Jim Knowles and his staff to do that. Like you said, get some young guys, get not even young guys, because you need Court Williams to get some time. You need, in these blowouts. And as Jim Knowles told us a month or so ago when we talked to him, like last year, when you're installing the offense and trying to get output of the installing the defense and trying to get output on the defense, output from the defense, it's kind of hard to also then try to get more guys on the field, because you're in the moment and you can't really look back until after the season, which he said he finally looked back this spring and was like, oh, I could see why, we can play more guys this year. And I wrote about that today at BuckeyeHuddle.com. So you can check that out, but not to plug the stuff we write, but that's one thing for me.
Super chat from Glasswing Butterfly: for equipment or beer, y'all decide. Appreciate all you do. Go Bucks. Beer.
Well, and thank you very much for the super chat. I'm saying, why not both? Kegerator. for the road. Once we get into the hotel, wheel it on in, and boom, we've got it
I mean,
there.
we could just take like a party ball, like on there. Remember the party ball?
I I was thinking about the party ball yesterday. In fact, what we used to do with the party ball, by the way, we would get a party ball, you drink the party ball, and then you use it to as a change, as a like a piggy bank for the next party ball. So like all of the change that you would bring into the apartment would go into the party ball, and then you would exchange that change to get another party ball. It's like it was recycling, basically, is what we would do.
Ashes to ashes, dust to dust.
Do you remember taking the pop bottles back to the grocery store for a dime a piece? It's kind of like that. You're buying you're buying a new 8-pack of Pepsi bottles. Let me bring in the old eight bottles of Pepsi. And I think I just lost 84% of the audience because they don't remember that.
Well, and I was going to say, we never had the soda out of glass when I was growing up. It was always can or 2 liter or whatever, or we were drinking the cans of High C or whatever. But I never, no, everything that I had to do growing up was all about the damn paper drive. I mean, oh, you're not going to get the pizza party if you don't do the paper drive. And my parents were like, well, we're not getting the paper. I mean, so we never had any newspapers. So I was always that kid that was just sitting there going, well, I guess I can't go to the pizza party because I never met the goal for the paper drive.
You never had glass bottles?
No.
Was this when you were in California or New Hampshire? Either way, both hippie places.
Well, and then in New Hampshire, no. I mean, Ice Station Zebra up there. No, we didn't. It just never really was a thing. I mean, I think the first time I drank a soda out of a glass bottle is when I had like a Mexican Coke or something like that. And that could have been 10 years ago. I mean, we just never really did it. And like I brought up on Twitter the battle of the orange sodas, and I said, if you're given a choice between Crush and Sunkist and you don't pick Crush, then you're a Philistine. And then somebody's like, well, you got to drink it out of the glass. I'm like, I have no idea where to find that.
Wow. That's unfortunate. I guess back in New Hampshire, you just drink maple syrup and suck on a tree, basically, is what you guys consume for sustenance there. But here in Ohio, we had glass bottles, and not just the 8-pack of glass bottles, but the stuff you'd get out of the pop machine would be glass bottles. It was all glass. But again, Toledo, the glass city was 40 miles from us, so we had a supplier. Basically, it was all glass. Everything was glass, and plastic didn't come in.
The soda machine.
Yeah, soda machine, pop machine.
Okay, I'm just making sure. And I know that I've seen the maps, and I know I'm behind. A super chat's just popped in. I know I'm behind enemy line.
Please stop talking about this.
Well, it is Jordan Kapler, so he probably does want me to shut up. But it just wasn't a thing. Jordan Kapler, super chat. How much do I need to donate for Kevin to storm the field mid-game, and what current roster player would you want to tackle him?
Oh, wow.
Well, I'm assuming I'm setting the price because I'm the one who is going to get speared and probably banned.
Let me set the price. Let me set it. What's the lowest super chat? $1.99. I'll go with that.
I
donated $1.99.
I will not comply. I will not comply. And they need to have somebody like like a Mookie Cooper or something like that. Somebody small. I mean, I don't care how fast they are. I'm not running away from anybody.
Jaden Fielding, kickoff guy.
I was going to say, just as long as it's not Parker Lewis. One, he can't lose, and two, I mean, he's actually a pretty tall dude when you get a chance to see him. Yeah, I don't know. I would have to say somebody, maybe like Xavier Johnson when he's still like injured or something like that.
I would say whatever amount you donate correlates to that jersey number. So like $6, Sonny Styles, something like that. So you could just donate $6 and Kevin will run out on the field and Sonny Styles will tackle him and we will have a bunch of fun. And if you want to throw in another $6, he'll do it again.
No, how about, and $86 isn't enough, but I was going to say 86 for like Bryson Rogers or something like that. I was trying to think of people in like the 80s that are not necessarily like monsters in size or whatever.
Well, you got some kickers in the 90s, so that might be the way to go.
You do, but kickers aren't people.
Anyway,
Before
that'll be the show.
Yes, before we got into all of this, we were talking a little bit of recruiting, and we
Mhm.
never got to talking about a cornerback out of Springfield who is also making a decision in the month of July. Tony, what do we know there?
Yeah, Aaron Scott has announced that his commitment will be July 30th, which, from what the internet tells me, correlates to his father's birthday. His father, which the internet also tells me, and I've learned most of this from a Michigan message board, which is devastated right now. But his father is an Ohio State fan. He has set his commitment date for his father's birthday. The Michigan side of the fandom is doing the math on this, and after taking their shoes and socks off, they are not happy. They're a little bit bummed right now that they think this is going to go Ohio State's way. It is it's been an adventurous battle, and he's taken official visits to both Michigan and Ohio State. Also, he continues to throw Oregon in when he talks to people, like, oh, don't forget about Oregon as well. I might go to Oregon, but it's a must win for Ohio State, and it would be another, I think, painful loss for Michigan, because I think at one point, maybe they still do, felt pretty good about him.
Well, I know that the Michigan coaches certainly were portraying the message that they felt good about him, and there certainly are some people on that beat who were parroting what the coaches were saying. I don't think that on the Ohio State side of things, I don't think that they ever really got super worried. I think that until you see Michigan come into the state of Ohio and really beat Ohio State out for a kid that is quote unquote wide open. And, because people will be like, well, they got Jordan Marshall. Well, that's just kind of the way that running back recruiting happened there. I mean, and then you could sit there and look at like Rod Moore. Ohio State didn't necessarily recruit Rod Moore all that much, but Aaron Scott was truly a head to head battle on a kid that there was a lot of belief that on the Michigan side that they would be able to land him. And once again, it goes back to when Jim Tressel put a fence around the state of Ohio and was able to keep Michigan out. I mean, during the John Cooper years and certainly before, we saw plenty of guys escape through the northern border. And we're not necessarily seeing that yet. It's kind of been a change in Michigan's recruiting strategy as of late to recruit a little bit more in Ohio. I think earlier in the Jim Harbaugh regime, they passed on Ohio. They focused more on the Northeast for whatever reason, and weren't necessarily even going head to head with Ohio and a lot of out of state kids. So now do they change their policy a little bit once again after sinking a lot of time on a couple of Ohio corners, one already committed to Ohio State and one in about a month that we're assuming will commit to Ohio State.
Yeah, and you heard so much about this battle. He could go either way, and he's leaning this way, leaning that way, and yet none of the, whether it's 24/7 or On Three or Rivals, none of their prediction people were siding with Michigan. You had a handful siding with Ohio State, and at this point, that's still where things are going. You mentioned Jordan Marshall, the number 7 running back in the nation. Ohio State also has a commitment from James Peoples, the number 5 running back in the nation. It's a three back class for Ohio State right now. So if you're going to miss out on a Jordan Marshall and you're going to lose him to Michigan, at least you've gotten James Peoples and Jordan Lyle, the number 12 running back, and we'll see what Sam Williams-Dixon does this season in Pickerington, because I think he is right now pretty underrated. And I'm not saying he's going to be a 5-star or whatever, but 3-star running back that
And
Ohio State says. Yeah, go ahead.
Nobody knows what he really is. I mean, he put up monster numbers up in Holmes County playing against the Amish, against Mennonites, but let's see what he looks like playing at here in Pickerington. What that ends up. They play a pretty good schedule, so we'll see quickly. I mean, we had the opportunity to see him a little bit at Ohio State 7-on-7 event. He wasn't utilized a ton, as he's still probably drinking from a fire hose in terms of getting up to speed on some things and everything else, but he certainly had some moments out there that he looked pretty explosive. Granted, 7-on-7 football leads to explosiveness just based on its adjacency to football and not being real football.
Well, and we saw him in Obetz at the Under Armour Next camp a couple months ago, where he and Bo Jackson were the running back MVPs. Bo Jackson in 2025, running back from Villa Angela St. Joe's in Cleveland. And those two guys were the running back MVPs, while it was Jordan Marshall who got some invite to Future 50. No, not Future 50.
Something, yeah.
Yeah, got the invite because the tickets were already printed out. But those two guys were the MVPs, the running back MVPs. So I am very much looking forward to seeing what Sam Williams-Dixon can do. And I know there is some concern about Kentucky, but after the 7-on-7 tournament, he came out and said, after my Ohio State official visit, I'm completely sold on Ohio State. I'm solid. So it's looking like a very rare 3 running back class, but we shall see what happens down the stretch, because basically anything can happen once NIL and things like that might get involved. Who knows?
Yeah, I mean, real mess. Billy Tuesday, Air Noland, Ohio State's quarterback commit, is now a 5-star on composite. Certainly have seen him moving up, and everybody kind of wants to have this as a proxy war between Ohio State and Michigan with Air Noland and Jaden Davis. I'm always quick to say, let's remember we're talking about 2 young men and everything else, and you can sit there and like Air Noland and not have to sit there and say that the other guy is this, that, and the other. But Air Noland certainly has been moving up on a lot of the national quarterback rankings and has overtaken Jaden Davis on several of them. And Michigan fans will be quick to point out, well, Ohio State really wanted Jaden Davis. In fact, they did. And, there was an opportunity where it could have been Jaden Davis or Dylan Raiola in the class. And I know I'm not supposed to say that name in polite company, Buckeye company, that is. And, things did not end up happening with Jaden Davis. So, I'm quick to sit there and say there's no reason to dump on the kid. But Air Noland, I think, is really kind of emerging. And I think people are going to be very happy with him and focusing on what he's going to do here in his senior season. I'll say that I think that this year at Langston Hughes High School down in suburban Georgia, Atlanta, Georgia, he may not have as much talent around him. Namely, he's not going to be throwing to Jelani Thurman. So that's kind of a big deal right there. But I know there will be people who will pour through every single stat line and try to come up with this conclusion or the other. But the only conclusion that needs to be there is that Ohio State got themselves a good one.
Yeah, and he's continued to perform well in all of these camp situations and things like that. And we'll see what happens this season for him. Ooh, what do we got here? Love the hat, Tony, from Gary K. That thing must be really old. Actually, they sell new hats that look old. That's pretty much what, is going on. I liked it. Zima was popular in the late 80s and 90s. It was. Kevin, did you ever do that? Now, Zima came in glass bottles. So I don't know if you had. Yeah.
Well, I drink beer out of glass bottles and stuff. I mean, not that Zima's beer. I would never besmirch the name of beer by Zima. In 1994, I was living in Atlanta. Yeah, back in 1994, I was living in Atlanta doing my internship at CNN, and I worked in a liquor store to pay the bills because my internship didn't pay. And a Zima rep, or whoever made Zima, I don't know, Satan, whoever made it, came in and did like a sampling for us, because if you know the product, you'll be more likely to push it. Wasn't a big fan of it, but shouldn't probably say this, but the statute of limitations is over. I drank the hell out of it while I was working because I just poured it. We all pour them in cups, like in red Solo cups, and act like we're drinking Sprite or something like that. So, yeah, it was something. I knew some people were like, "Oh, you put a little grenadine in it or something." I'm like, "Ooh, really fancy up that malt beverage right there." But no, I was not that guy.
What we did, or what people around me did, you'd put a Jolly Rancher in it and get some time release fruit flavor in it. I only ever had a couple. It wasn't really my thing. I much preferred actual beer, and so that's what I did. Carl Sagasser, Georgia plays dudes early. We should be doing the same as well. And this is one of my pet peeves, Kevin. And thank you for the question. Ohio State started two true freshmen in 2021 with Travion Henderson, Denzel Burke. And they didn't play as many true freshmen last year because they were playing so many sophomores, Marvin Harrison, Emeka Ibuka, guys like that. So Ohio State will play freshmen. It just depends on so many situations. It's not like they're holding them back. In last year's defense, why on earth would you hold somebody back that could make your defense better when what was going on last year at the end of the year? I know everybody wanted to see CJ Hicks and wanted to see Sonny Styles. You finally did get to see Sonny Styles, and he was part of a defense that gave up 40-some points to Georgia. And I'm not saying it was his fault, but clearly he wasn't going to solve everything. I think CJ Hicks should have played some on defense, and he didn't. But Jim Knowles, I asked Jim Knowles, he said it hasn't held him back it won't set him back from what he's going to do. But Ohio State plays freshmen. You can't pick 1 year and do this wide-ranging generalization, because I mean, look what J.K. Dobbins did as a freshman. If you've got the right freshmen, they're going to play. And that's one of my I've ranted on Twitter about it, and some people see it, and even the ones that do, if they still want to believe the opposite, that freshmen don't play at Ohio State, they ignore it. And maybe that's the real pet peeve, is when people ignore what I say. I think that is the message.
What? People will go back to, and we're going back a little bit here, pre-Ryan Day. Why the hell isn't Von Bell playing or whatever? And, it's, we remember those. And there's certainly the devil we don't know versus the devil we do know. And everybody wants to move guys through. I mean, I think there is kind of a happy medium there. I think that we're going to hear a lot about quarterback. If Kyle McCord is the guy, why isn't Devin Brown playing more? Why aren't they getting Devin Brown ready? Well, you got Kyle McCord, a guy with one collegiate start. You got to get him some experience. So I think that the biggest happy medium would be get Kyle McCord, again, if he's the guy, his experience out there, but let Devin Brown run the playbook. Don't have him just hand it to the two, right between the 2 and 1 of Evan Pryor, and say, run it off tackle, do this. I mean, be able to do a little bit more of that. I think that would satisfy some of the concerns. And I know that I'm really focusing in just on one position versus the overreaching question that Carl Sagasser had there, or comment that he had there. But, nobody's truly ever going to be happy, because on the flip side, you do play younger guys, then it's going to be like, well, why aren't we seeing the older guys? Why don't style points matter anymore? They should be going out and hanging 21 more points up on Rutgers or what have you.
And JT Tuimoloau started a couple games as a true freshman. Jack Sawyer played as a true freshman. It just depends. And when you're only looking at one specific area and you're trying to generalize from that area, it's never going to be entirely accurate. Comment from Ryan Dawes: it would be cruel if Aaron Scott committed to Michigan on his father's birthday. And Carl Sagasser, the kiss of death equals the father's birthday. And I mentioned I did peruse the Michigan message board to see the reactions, and they've pretty much just have pulled the covers over their head, and they know the boogeyman can still get them, but they're trying, and I think they have decided that Aaron Scott won't be a Michigan Wolverine. But I'm not going to say that, because again, you talk to so many people and they're like, I am not confident calling this for Ohio State, like confidently. Like, I think it's going to be Ohio State, but I'm not going to say it is Ohio State. That's a lot of what the responses have been from the people who are, making calls and talking to coaches.
Yeah, I mean, I feel strongly, and even if I felt, even if the kid would sit there and say, "Hey, Kevin, I'm going to let you in. This is, call me Noon. Hey, Noon, I'm going to let you in. This is what's happening." I still wouldn't ruin the kid's moment, but Nothing. I mean, hell, there's a long time to go, but the fact that he has set a date and everything else, this isn't. I'm setting a date, and I have to decide by this date. I mean, he knows. He knows where he's going, and I think that he really enjoyed the drama. The problem is that go back 20 years ago and recruiting, there were still people interested in recruiting. It may not have been as many people, but there were people interested in recruiting, but there wasn't as much sleuthing, and there certainly wasn't social media where kids were putting out their own information. So,
Hmm.
oh, I want to sit there and I want it all to be a surprise. Well, guess what? There aren't many surprises in the world of recruiting. Maybe a couple of like National Signing Day announcements, things of that nature. Sometimes I get a little more surprised about when a kid announces versus where he announces, but I'm hard pressed to think about, that one, I did not see that one necessarily coming. That's, you know, and that's not, oh, I'm so great at my job. We know I'm not. But that's just more of a case of there's just so much information out there. And if you're willing to filter it the right way and filter out, the noise that is just noise for the sake of being noise, you generally have a pretty good idea.
Looking at the comment from where was it? Talking about and I'll get to Gary K, but talking about Juju Lewis and Aaron Nolan going against each other. Juju Lewis, the 2026 quarterback. Ohio State, of course, already has their 2025 quarterback in Tavian St. Clair, but I mean, we're already talking about 2026 guys when the 2024 guy still hasn't even signed yet. And that's, we can also talk about Will Griffin at some point, the 2026 guy we saw a few weeks ago at Ohio State camp. This from Gary K. Any news or new rumors on Brandon Baker and which way he is leaning? We need a big time offensive tackle, and especially one from a West Coast powerhouse program. Kevin?
Doesn't matter where the hell he comes from. They just need to get some big time offensive tackles. He could come from Mars. I mean, I know what you're saying there, Gary K. I'm still taking the field. I'm still taking the field against Ohio State on that one, and I think that's just a safe bet. I think Ohio State certainly didn't do anything to hurt its cause. I think Ohio State made up a lot of ground. If you feel that I mean, the fact is the distance that Ohio State is from Brandon Baker and where he lives and everything versus even like Oregon, to go to Eugene, and it's not necessarily you're going to do a car ride from Southern California up to Eugene, but it's a lot easier of a trip. My wife is actually in the air right now, flying from Southern California back to Columbus right now, and with the time change and everything else, it's a beastly trip in a lot of ways. But I wouldn't be surprised if Brandon Baker picked Ohio State, but I'm not ready to sit there and say that I have this at 50-50. I mean, because remember, if you have Ohio State at 50 and you have the rest of the field at 50, and it's not a it's not a two-team race, that means that you have Ohio State as some sort of overwhelming favorite.
Yeah.
So it doesn't necessarily work that way. I still, until I hear otherwise, I think Oregon is the team that could land them.
Odysseus 2002, haven't gotten a modern day recruit since Nikki Sualua. I did not realize that he was modern day. Do you think Baker will be the next, or do you think it might be Jordan Davison?
It's a lot better opportunity for it to be Jordan Davison. I'm not going to sit there and put anything firmly down on a 2025 recruit at this point, but I think that that's the kid. It's gonna take somebody to kind of break the mold, and then people are gonna be like, well, damn, now the dam's broken. I think that they're gonna get everybody from modern day. Well, that's not necessarily how this all works, but I think that once you get somebody there, then you have kind of that built in, well, I'm not going 2/3 the way across the nation. I don't know anybody. I mean, I'm sure everybody's being told that it snows in a matter of feet, not inches around here, and probably for 9 months a year and everything else. And certainly the killer turf on the field at Ohio Stadium and the practice fields and everything else. I mean, I'm sure everything is being used against Ohio State. Remember, 4 months ago, Zabian Brown, he's going to definitely end up at Ohio State, the kid out of modern day. Now we're not really talking about him a whole hell of a lot. So stuff changes, but if you put it Baker versus Davison, I think that Davison is the much more likely one, and I would even sit there and say of that much more likely, I think that one has a very, very real shot of landing.
Yeah, and that's not to say Baker doesn't. It could be 85% to 50%, and like both are could be considered likely by some people, but one is obviously more likely. Mika Hanna asks, "What about Dylan Stewart?" And he's South Carolina is the other school in there, right? Is that the
Yeah. I mean, there's several others, but I think South Carolina is either the 1 or the 1A on that one right now.
and whenever there's a school like South Carolina that is involved, it's always like there must be some special reason, and then you have to overcome that special reason because it's not like South Carolina is a national power. They're an SEC school, but sort of, So I think it always interests me when there's just this random outlier of really why is Virginia Tech one of your top three? That sort of thing. It must mean something more than just Ohio State against Virginia Tech or Ohio State against South Carolina or Georgia versus South Carolina. Like, obviously, you're going to choose Georgia. There must be a reason for South Carolina. And is he's not a South Carolina kid, is he?
I mean, he's out of DC. I don't know, but
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, I don't know if he's from DC, like lifelong, or if what it is. I mean, yeah, let's remember everyone's going to be like, well, remember Jadavion Clowney? Well, that was quite a few years ago, and we're talking about a kid who's what, like 16 years old right now. I mean, there's got to be something there because you look at his quote unquote his finalists. It's like one of these things. I don't want to sing
Mhm.
too much because then we'll get demonetized. It's not
Right.
like the other. Um, so I don't know. I think that Ohio State certainly has an opportunity there, but they do, as Tony said, they do have to overcome something special for South Carolina to be on a list of much more proverbial blue bloods. Gary K, Kevin, are you excited to go back to SoCal in 2024 when the Bucks play UCLA? I'm hoping to get to that game. I love getting back to Southern California. I get there, I exhale, I'm like, "Oh my god, I feel like I'm home." The scenery is, what I remember and everything else. Then after a couple of days, I'm like, "All right, I'm ready to leave." Um, I always thought I was going to retire in Dana Point, and then I quickly realized I'm never going to get to retire. So that is an issue. And housing is just crazy out there. I mean, I would never be able to move back there, but I am looking forward to going out and seeing a non-Rose Bowl game at the Rose Bowl. I mean, I'm sure Ohio State fans are going to load up the game against UCLA. And my travel tip: if you want to avoid LA as much as possible, fly into Ontario and stay in Pasadena. You can, a lot of airlines fly into Ontario, and it's not a terrible drive to get to Pasadena, and you can avoid all of that. Now, there are going to be a lot of people like, the whole reason I'm going is to go to LA. Well, that's fine. That's fine. And, go ahead and do that. But there are going to be a lot of people who are kind of habitual road game travelers who know that, okay, I don't need all of the pomp and circumstance. I'm there to go and have a good time and hang out with Buckeye fans and everything else. And I think you have a much better shot if you kind of focus your efforts around Pasadena.
I am looking forward to being at that game and seeing UCLA's home jerseys, home uniforms. I think it's part of college football history. It's different than seeing Ohio State against Washington or whomever, Utah. It's more natural if I think if UCLA is involved. This from Tony Gerdeman's burner account. Is Tom back on suspension again for complimenting Kevin? That kind of tomfoolery is not tolerated here. Again, showing where the phrase tomfoolery comes from. No, Tom is not on suspension. He just, I got stuff to do because he views his life more important than providing content and talking to Buckeye fans. Couldn't be me. Couldn't be me.
Chad Stryker, late to the party, didn't know you were going live. Yeah, we talked about this on Wednesday, and then it kind of hung in the air for a little bit. We never kind of locked in a time, and then like this morning, we put it together. Once we get closer to the season, there will be a much more regular, Friday Friday live regular type of situation. We're trying to get back into it again. As I said earlier, we're simulcasting both on YouTube and on Facebook. We're testing some things out. So if you're watching us on YouTube, be sure to subscribe to the channel, hit that thumbs up. That means everything for us, for people being able to discover us. If you're watching us on YouTube, give us a thumbs up over there as well. We only have 2 on YouTube. And if you really like what we're doing, go ahead and hit those stars. Apparently, those stars go and give us money and help us create more content or beer or equipment or whatever. But Glass Wing Butterfly is already worth 50 stars with her very gracious super chat for all of that. So, yeah, I think I've got all of the plugs out of the way. Let me keep going down through the questions. I know that we had some stuff that we sort of prepared or whatever. If we kind of want to get into that a little bit about trap games, I've got a
Oh,
schedule in front of me. Um,
yeah.
Somebody had, I don't know if they asked it in a chat on one of my Big Me shows or they emailed me. I do get emails, Kevin@BuckeyeGrove.com, if you want to send me emails or money. And it's like, you should do a show talking about the trap games of the Big Ten. Go through everybody's schedule and what that trap game is. And I immediately mentioned it to Tom and Tony. I said, I think this could be a good show. And as we were getting prepped for this show, Tony's like, I got my notes done. I'm like, oh, I've forgotten. So Tony will probably lead this a little more, but I've got the composite schedule in front of me too. So I'll just sit there and tell Tony
Okay.
meekly when he's right and just completely rag on him when he's wrong.
Well, and we should probably also define what a trap game is, because there are some teams that their entire schedule is, they're not even traps. They're just open holes in the yard. Like you're gonna fall into these. And what is a trap game for Rutgers? What is a trap game for Indiana? Like, do these programs have trap games, or are they all trap games?
Well, I mean, if it's a trap game, I think a trap game implies that you're a successful team to begin with. So if you're
Okay.
if you're not a good team, I don't think. I mean, you could be the one laying the trap, but I don't know if you're necessarily. I mean, if you're a 2-10 team, I mean, oh God, that Indiana State game, that's a real trap game because that's the difference between a 1-win season and a 2-win season. So I have a hard time with, saying that a sub 500 team really
Okay.
has a trap game, but I think there are certain instances. I mean, if we're talking about a coach who's on the hot seat or something, then that's, I think it suddenly becomes meaningful because there is a bigger thing at the end of the rainbow.
Basically, the trap E cannot be a trapper, I think is what we're saying. Or you can maybe not. I don't know. Let's start with Michigan, because I know people want to talk about Michigan. Then we'll go to Ohio State. For me, I went and I'm looking, and perhaps I'm way off on this. I think the trap game is either Nebraska or Minnesota, and I'm going to side with Nebraska because it is on the road. 13 of Nebraska's 17 losses the last 2 years have been by one score. 5 of their 8 losses last year were by one score. They lost to Michigan 2021, 32-29. Last time these two teams played in Lincoln. You got 7 starters back on offense and on defense. That's not including the transfers like Jeff Sims at quarterback, who, yeah, he was okay, sometimes bad at Georgia Tech, but as a seasoned starter, can escape pressure, can create some things. Nebraska will be either anywhere between 4-0 or 2-2 in this coming into this game, but they'll probably be on a 2 to 4 game winning streak because their first 2 games are possible losses. They start off at Minnesota, and then they're at Colorado. Then they have Northern Illinois and Louisiana Tech. So they'll be on at least a 2-game winning streak. And this is the biggest game of their season until maybe the Iowa game, but I would say this might just be the biggest game of the season for them. It's an opportunity for Matt Rule to set the tone for the entire program, to turn the entire program around in one game. That's Michigan's trap game.
I agree with you on this one. And that was the game that my eyes were drawn to. Nebraska certainly will be tested to start the season with Minnesota and Colorado right off there. And then they'll be able to kind of fine tune some of the problems that they had with Northern Illinois and Louisiana Tech. So, I mean, in Michigan, Michigan prior to that plays, 3 bums and Rutgers. So, I don't think that necessarily that Michigan is going to be tested. It's not going to be a case of where they're going to be pushed. And I think that Nebraska certainly could push them. But with that being said, every year I fall into the trap of buying into Nebraska, only to be made to look really foolish. But Scott Frost is gone. It's Matt Rule's team now, and we'll see if things are a little bit different. So, yeah, I agree. I think that that Nebraska game is certainly going to be the trap, even more so than maybe Minnesota on the back end of that.
Because we both have done our like Big Ten predictions, and I'm just looking back to see what I have. I have Nebraska, I think 6-6, even though 6-6, and I have them losing to Michigan, but obviously, but we'll see how that goes. What about Ohio State for you, Kevin? What do you feel is the trap game for the Buckeyes?
Purdue,
Purdue.
always Purdue.
Oh,
Always Purdue. I mean, they just have very, marginal success as of late going into Ross-Ade Stadium. It is a road game. Penn State is on the other end of it. You'll come off of Maryland, a team that you kind of know what they're all about. I mean, obviously Maryland has been able to push Ohio State in College Park. This game will be in Columbus, so Ohio State should be able to probably sleepwalk through it. You know that Penn State is going to be a battle. A lot of people really like Penn State going into this season. And then you have a Purdue team that has a new head coach, has gone out, picked up a lot of guys in the portal. While you've done all this stuff, year in and year out of scouting teams, you don't know a lot about this Purdue team. And you sit there and yes, we're kind of in the middle third of the season at that point. But prior to Ohio State, I mean, they open with Fresno State, they go to Virginia Tech, Syracuse, Wisconsin, Illinois, and Iowa. So you're going to at least get to see them get pressed by some teams, but strange stuff just happens at that stadium, man. I'm just telling you, and I just don't think that any other game on the schedule really grabs me as a trap. I'm not going to say a trip to Rutgers is going to frighten Ohio State before a home game against Michigan State. And, I don't think by rule a Wisconsin game can be a trap game, especially when, a former player and a one-year coach is now the new head coach with the Badgers.
yeah, and one of the things I have written here is, can Wisconsin even be considered a trap game? Because in order to be a trap, you kind of have to be unaware of it, or else you're just choosing to be caught. And it's not like Ohio State is going to walk into Wisconsin unaware of what that can be, or what it very well may be. So I'm with you on the Purdue thing. We've seen that many, many times. I was looking at my Phil Steele magazine. I was pretty surprised. He's got Purdue, I think, last in the West, which surprised me because
Northwestern plays in that division.
exactly. That's exactly my point. So I don't know. Maybe if I was wondering, like, did he forget to write this out, and then they just had to throw it into the back of the Big Ten section? It's like, just throw it in there. Before we got to get it in there before it goes to print. So that surprised me because they return, half of their starters. You're getting Hudson Card in from Texas. You've got the defensive-minded head coach and Graham Harrell as an offensive coordinator. So you would think there's a good mix there. So I'm interested to see what they do. And if Ryan Day reads Phil Steele's magazine, maybe yes, Purdue is definitely a trap game, because he's going to look at them and be like, oh, they're worse than Northwestern. We got this thing.
Peaceclan says that maybe the Purdue Stadium is haunted. And Ben Higgins says Purdue has been brought up in my therapy sessions on multiple occasions.
Yeah, I think I've told this story on the show before, but I think it was 96, 98. I went to the Purdue game, and it was the game Purdue started 14-0 on Ohio State, and the fans were going crazy. And, we were sitting amongst the Purdue fans, and they're just so excited. And, one of them looks back at us, and they're like, we know we're going to lose. Just let us have this moment. Just let us have this happiness. We know we're going to lose. And I think the final score is like 42-14, but it was a couple of long plays for Purdue to get into the end zone and make people happy until about the halftime.
I mean, and everybody just wants to have a good time. I mean, there's nothing riding on any of this stuff. It's just a bunch of young men running around chasing a ball. I mean, come on.
So Penn State, I have here either at Illinois. But again, did Illinois play so well last year that they're no longer a trap? Or they're like a legitimate thing right now? I think just you're going to Illinois, and we know what happens when Penn State and Illinois get together. It can take a while to finish, but I have it either at Illinois or the week after with Iowa at home. You get through a tough Illinois game, you finally get home, and you relax a little bit. But here comes Iowa, and I don't even know if Iowa can be considered a trap game because you have to be aware of them. So I don't know. What do you have?
I'll throw a third game out there. I mean, both of those make a little bit of sense. I'm going to say, what about at Maryland before the Michigan game? And here's the thing is that Penn State returns a lot, but they lose a lot in their secondary. By this point of the season, young guys should be established, but we know what Maryland is. We know that they like to throw the ball around. I mean, that's the kind of game where if a couple of 50-50 balls and a couple of back shoulder fades go the wrong way, I mean, you could be in for something. I mean, we've seen 52-51 at Maryland before. We've seen Ohio State get pressed there in College Park before. So I don't think Maryland is going to be particularly good this year. But with that being said, you don't have to be good to be a trap. The Iowa team that beat Ohio State wasn't all that good and sat there and frog stomped Ohio State. So you just have to be better on that one given day. And who knows, but I've certainly seen games where Maryland has hosted Penn State and it's like, oh, this could be the year that they upset them, and then Penn State just obliterates them and just leaves a little red spot on the pavement.
Wasn't that 2017 when we were all in the sports book at Council Bluffs, excited to watch
Friday game,
Maryland and Penn State on a Friday, and Penn State just destroyed them. And then was it last year, the year before, we were at a restaurant or a sports book excited to watch Maryland and Iowa just depantsed them, So tell me is Talia Tagovailoa even going to be upright and healthy for this game, because it's the eighth game of the season, so probably not. I think at this point, I just also expect Penn State to be able to run the ball pretty well, and Drew Aller at this point should be doing well also. So I mean, that might fit a trap game even better because I'm so confident that Penn State is going to beat them, whereas I'm less confident for the two examples I gave. So we'll strike all of this from the record. Is Maryland good enough to discuss trap games? Because to me, like, Mike Loxley is Admiral Akbar. Like, everything is a trap. It's a trap. It's a trap. This is one of those where they can lose just about any game they play because they're Maryland, but also they can almost win any game they play. You just don't expect them to, and everything has to go correctly. Is Maryland worth discussing?
I think we can discuss Maryland because You're right. I mean, it is a case of where they do kind of arise from their slumber to come out and play a really good game. And, there are 3 or 4 games that Maryland a year will come out and play excellent football. Now, that doesn't mean that they're going to win those 3 or 4 games, because if those happen to be against teams that are significantly better, Maryland's A game versus somebody else's B game isn't necessarily going to get them over the hump. But we've seen Maryland press Ohio State. We've seen Maryland do things before. So I think that's something. And as Ryan Dawes says, remember when Maryland beat Texas twice, 2 times. So I think those are some of the times that Maryland was drinking the juice and came out and played really well. So what do you have as I'm going over Maryland's schedule really for the first time in quite some time?
Nothing, because I don't know. How about this? After a bye week, they go to Northwestern, and it's just a random game because I think everything else they have to be.
Nebraska, look what they're sandwiched between.
Well, but you have to be alert. Like, that's something that's a neon sign. Be careful. Whereas Northwestern, that's they would never suspect that that's a trap game, and that's what makes it a trap game. But I definitely think they would. I definitely think they lose it or can lose at Nebraska. I don't even know if they'll be favored at that point. Every
year that Purdue's on the schedule, we're like, it's a trap. It's a trap. I mean, with even the Iowa game, I'm swinging from the toe hook like Alex Boone, saying it's a trap. It's a trap. And you can be told it, but I'm
Yeah.
told lots of things and I don't believe them, but it's like, okay, whatever, I'll just roll with the punches. But if you don't, and I mean, if it were just as easy of saying, if you're focused and you really address it, you'll never come out and play flat. Well, we know better than that. Everybody comes out and has a couple flat games, regardless, whether or not it's against a team that's just so inferior that even their A+ game isn't going to matter. I mean, I've seen, we saw Ohio State come out. Ben Higgins was talking about that he's having PTSD right
I
now. We're
know.
talking about so much negativity. I don't know if I'm going to speak a specific game into existence, but we've seen Ohio State go into huge games and just roll over and look terrible. So I mean, and it's not like well, they weren't prepared. Well, you should have been prepared.
I will remind people, Maryland lost 34-27 at Michigan last year. And a couple of bounces go Maryland's way in that one, and they may have stolen one from Michigan. The week before, Maryland beat SMU by the same score, 34-27. Just a side note, SMU's quarterback now at Wisconsin. Is that correct? Tanner Mordecai?
Tanner Mordecai, who may not even be the starter there. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm not sure who's going to trot out and be the guy. And when Ohio State and Wisconsin play in week 9, the guy who starts in week 1 may not be the guy. You just don't know. As Luke Fickell is taking over a new program and certainly has a ton of new faces. I mean, brings a couple guys over with him from his previous stop, but a lot of new faces. So there's a lot of sorting out there to do.
I did actually have a trap game for Rutgers, and that was the season opener Sunday against Northwestern. Other than that, it's Rutgers.
Yeah, you just can't. I mean, if you're not expected to win, then how do you really have a trap? And I kind of feel the same way about Michigan State as well.
Mhm.
Tuck leaving. I mean, I don't know. I'm not necessarily sold there. I mean, if Kenneth Walker the fourth walks through
Oh,
the door or something like that, not the third, but the fourth, then maybe they're onto something. I certainly been told by some friends who cover Michigan State, oh, don't sleep on them this year. I'm like, well, okay, whatever, but I don't see anything looking good for them.
Noah Kim chased Peyton Thorne away. Okay, we'll see.
Yeah.
I think Indiana, they may be favored in about 3 games this year, and that's giving them credit for their third one. So I don't think there's any reason to talk about them. Let's move to Wisconsin, because you look at their schedule and immediately, like, the Washington State game in week 2 stands out. Washington State won in Madison last year. I think one of the reasons that they ended up getting a new head coach and moving to Luke Fickell. So that's one. They go to Purdue, but they go to Purdue every other year, so that's something they have to be aware of. Um, you know, in terms of trap, is what about, again? I asked the question: is Illinois a trap at this point? Wisconsin going back to Illinois, or Brett Bielema bringing Wisconsin to Illinois, that sort of thing, where the Badgers are there, and it's going to be a game that he desperately wants to win. So I think maybe that's something to watch.
That's the one that I'm looking at right now because look at the schedule. They go open week, home Rutgers, home Iowa, then they've got the Illinois game, and then they go and they've got
Mhm.
uh home Ohio State. So it kind of fits in there where you have a couple of home games coming out of an open week, and you have just a gigantic game coming the week after there. I need to see a little bit more out of Illinois in terms of regularity before I'm going to buy that they are a team that's expected to do anything. You're right exactly with the Brett Bielema angle and everything else, but has it been played out? I mean, have we, is it special after the first time? I mean, does it really? I mean, and we know everything in the SEC just means more, but does it mean more in the Big Ten when you do that? I think that there's going to be enough attention put on it, but it's still one of those again where you're being told it's a trap, it's a trap, it's a trap. And you're like, how does he know which way we're going?
Well, and the thing with Illinois, losing defensive coordinator Ryan Walters, who was huge to their success last year as the new head coach at Purdue, and there are multiple examples of what happens to Ohio State when they lose an outstanding defensive coordinator, like when they lost Mark D'Antonio and moved to Mark Snyder, losing Jeff Hafley after the 2019 season, moving to Kerry Combs, you can have a significant drop off that corrupts the rest of the defense. And so that will be something to watch with Illinois. We know they're never really going to be outstanding on offense, I don't think. And losing Chase Brown at running back, who was maybe their entire team, that's
Everything.
going to be, that's going to be significant. So, again, maybe that's what makes Illinois even more of a trap game, because they're going to be worse this year. We have not yet completely defined.
Go back to the Michigan game against Illinois last year, and it was Chase Brown trying to pick him up and drag Fat Bert across the finish line. I mean, that's what it was. And when you don't have him, and when you have, I mean, it's been a minute since I could sit there and say, oh, I really liked Illinois' quarterback. It's been a while, and I don't think they're necessarily in any better situation coming here into 2023. So it would be trapalicious if they were able to do it, but they're going to have to win something 17-14, 14-10. They're not going to be able to get into a shootout and win a 38-35 game.
I think I would have to go back to maybe Nathan Scheelhaus as the last Illinois quarterback. I was like, he can do some things sometimes. I won't mention Juice Williams. There's already been enough PTSD going on, so I won't even mention the name Juice Williams.
This is not the feel-good show with any of that. Ryan Dawes, with a nickname that we've used before, Bert Beelzebub. Which I'm like, makes you wonder if you've been tapping our calls, because I've certainly have heard that name used for several years amongst other writers. Anybody else in the West, the soon-to-be defunct divisions of the Big Ten, that you think that is worthy of a trap game? Iowa. Okay.
I don't think they're at with Iowa State week 2. That's not really a trap game. That's a rivalry game, so it can't really be a trap game. I always look at the road games first, and the road games aren't trap games either. Those are games you have to be ready for, and that's Penn State, Wisconsin, and Nebraska. They do play Northwestern at Wrigley Field after a bye. And the thing with Iowa's offense, any game is losable. And it's not unlike trestle ball, where if one thing goes bad, that could cost you the game. And I always use the 2003 Wisconsin game, Chris Gamble slipping, as an example. It only takes one thing to go bad for you to lose a game when you play so conservatively. And not that Iowa is conservative by choice. They're conservative by coordinator. Circumstance. Perfect. So I do wonder, Purdue is at home. Purdue's at Iowa. Is that one? I don't know. Iowa, to me, they've got some tough road games, and like I said, those aren't really traps. So I guess you have to look at the home games, and it comes down to maybe like Purdue or Minnesota. And the good thing for Minnesota, that's like week 7 or 8, so they'll have some experience and see if they can row the boat into Iowa City.
I'm gonna go completely wild here, outside the box, and let me put up Ryan Dawes' super chat. We'll get to that after my thought really quick. I'm going to say the last game of the season, which is a big rivalry game, that Friday game against Nebraska. Whether or not it's a case of Brian Ferentz needs to score 38 points in order not to be sanctioned due to the way his deal is. Let's say that Iowa has success and comes out of the wheel of jumble of the West and is vying for, I don't know, let's even say a Big Ten West title. That is absolutely a losable game. If you have a lot of pressure on there, and you're trying so hard to do this, and Iowa again is just a team that, if the wind blows the wrong way, if a fly farts or something like that, everything could come apart on them. So I think that for me, it's that last game, because I just have a feeling that something is going to be on the line, and it may not necessarily be a title, but it could be a coordinator. And again, if a coordinator gets run, that's related to the head coach. Does the head coach at that point say, "Well, I'm done too"? So there could be, and again, we're playing hypothetical here. There could be a lot on the line there.
Gary Barta, Iowa AD, stepped down so he wouldn't have to fire Brian Ferentz. That's my conspiracy theory. He's like, because he's because of the nepotism laws, he's the boss, and and he's like, rather than do that, I'm just leaving entirely. I think Nebraska, for me, that's certainly a rivalry game and one that Nebraska can definitely win, and Iowa needs to be very, very careful of. And it may be the last game for Nebraska, assuming they don't get to a bowl game. So it would be a great way for them to end the season on a high note and take some momentum into the off season. Let's get to this super chat from Ryan Dawes. Who is going to win the West in the last year of the divisions? Kevin, like I said, we've both done our game projections.
I'm trying to get into my Dropbox to find my Excel sheet because I don't remember.
I've got mine up. I can talk about mine while you look for yours if you want, but I do have Wisconsin winning out. I have them going 10-2 overall with a loss to Illinois and a loss to Ohio State. That's what I'm going with now. I have Iowa going 6-3 in the Big Ten with losses at Penn State, at Wisconsin, and as we were just saying, at Nebraska. So I think that game, that last game at Nebraska, takes Iowa out completely. And Wisconsin, the last week of the Big Ten West is going to be fun because it's Wisconsin at Minnesota, it's Iowa at Nebraska, and that could decide a lot. I think it will decide a lot. It will decide who plays in the Big Ten championship game against Michigan or Ohio State, or even just those two teams.
Well, after a whole show of me just bagging on Illinois, apparently I have Illinois coming out of the West. I'm not exactly sure what I mean. I was at a bar. I was at a brewery as I was putting these together. I do remember that, and but it was early in the night, so I remember putting my computer up and like now I can really drink. But I have Illinois, but I have the Big Ten West as a battle of attrition, so to speak. I have Illinois 9-3, 7-2 in the league coming out, ahead of Wisconsin at 6-3, and then Iowa and Minnesota each at 5-4. I don't know what I was thinking at that point. I think part of it is that, again, you look at Wisconsin, first year head coach, completely reinventing the wheel there, completely having to reinvent the wheel, has a roster, or at least pieces of a roster that were used to doing things one way, and now they're going to try and do it some way else. So I think in some coin flips, I picked against Wisconsin. And then having Iowa and Minnesota, you have Iowa, who is offensively challenged, who certainly is able to do a lot of great things on defense. I think that defense is going to be able to keep them competitive. And then with Minnesota, I don't know. I just don't want PJ Fleck clapping at me or something like that. So that's just kind of how I had it working out. But now I'm certainly having regrets when I look at this. So
well, this hasn't been published. You don't have to tell anybody about it if you don't want to.
Too late.
I think for me, but like Iowa plays at Wisconsin, so I think for me that was one of the big things because I'm always a home field advantage kind of guy. I have Wisconsin winning at both Washington State and at Purdue in two of the first 4 games of the year, but I can absolutely see those two being flipped. I think my coin flips went for Wisconsin, yours went away from them, and I think similarly my coin flips with Illinois went away from them. I do have them finishing 6-6 with a 4-5 mark in the Big Ten, losing at Maryland, basically losing all of their road games and winning their home games because that's just how I do things. Except for the Penn State game, they will lose that. Don't worry.
And
you probably have them winning
on which one?
The Penn State game.
Who? I was reading questions.
Illinois, Penn State at Illinois. Did you have the Illini in that one?
No, I have Penn State winning that one. I have the Illini. I mean, I have the Illini. There are 3 losses. I'm losing to God. I must have been drunk. I have them losing at Kansas.
Me too.
I have them losing to Penn State, and then I have them losing at Maryland.
So do I.
So those are my 3 losses.
And you have them winning at Purdue, at Minnesota, and at Iowa.
Yeah.
I can't believe you don't have any faith in Brian Ferentz. This is outrageous. But that's also the Big Ten West. Like,
well, you know,
it all makes sense because none of it makes sense.
Well, and that's the thing. It's like the one ACC, whether it's the Coastal or the I don't know, the sand or the water or whatever. I mean, everybody's going to come out of that division with 3 losses. It's just how it is. Jordan, we will get to your super chat in a minute, but I wanted to touch upon this because we do have Tony here. Miss Michael Campbell in the chat on the Voice of College Football the other day. He was slinging all sorts of kinds of nonsense. Did you read any of it? I had some things around the house I had to get done and was not able to hit that show.
I mean, if in all due respect to Michael, like if you've been part of any of those shows and been part of any of those chats, it's all the same. And I don't even remember what it was because I've been on the internet so long, Kevin, that I can just let stuff like wash over me. It's like there's a lot of it's just white noise that it's and I think that's healthy, but sometimes stuff sticks with me and it annoys me, and that is unhealthy. And I try to say side on the healthy side more often, but it is also I'm also on the internet a lot, so it's impossible not to be bothered by some of it.
I'll let you take this super chat because once again I am the victim here.
This is from Jordan Kapler, super chat. Thank you, Jordan. Would you like to see a championship game between the 2 worst teams of each division? Could call it the Kevin series. You know, how about a 4-way, like a final 4 of the 4 worst teams in the Big Ten? Maybe then if you have 3 total games, you'd get enough attendance to equal one actual normal game that people wanted to see. But no, I would not like to see. I mean,
well, we're going to see one of the season. We're going to see it because based on my projections, we're going to see it when Rutgers and Northwestern play.
Do you need to see that twice?
No. Fool me once, fool me twice, fool me thrice, whatever. No, fool me with rice. I don't want to see the game once, but I'll watch it. I'll watch it because it's college football.
That's the thing. I'm much more likely to watch the first edition than the second edition because I will not be watching that in December. I'll sit down and game. You know, I'll sit down for 4 hours straight just waiting for pregame show for August 31st or something like that for that game. December, I'm gonna be, you know, what's on Netflix, that sort of thing. This from let me see here. Let me open up the screen a little bit larger. From Wrigley Puppy Frog. Tony, being a Zima guy, explains a lot. Kevin, teach this man what a real beer is.
Teach this man. I mean, you know, Miller High Life still isn't necessarily real beer, in my opinion.
No, that's wrong.
Well, that's fine. You can say. Well, Blatz is real beer, real bad beer. But I was going to say, do you have like a hat tree, like right there, like in front of your computer or whatever? I'm glad I'm here short because I don't have any. I don't think I have a single hat in here right now. Burger Chef. I am not familiar with Burger Chef.
They were around in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. We had one in Napoleon growing up as a kid, but it was only there for a little while, and then it became like a laundromat. So it's been gone for a while, but they had like mascots and stuff.
It met its Waterloo.
It did, in fact. But we already talked about Zima earlier in the show, so you can just scan through and look for that. But Kevin, what is your favorite beer?
Free, cold. I don't know. I mean, I've really kind of gotten a little beard out as of late, but right now, I'm on my way to the airport to go pick up my wife. I think I'm going to go find somewhere and have a beer. And I'm not going to go into the airport and pay $14 for a beer, but a nice cold beer sounds really good right now. I've gotten to the point of where I was such a beer snob for a long time, and it had to be, oh, I mean, serve it, serve it in this certain chalice or whatever. Now I just want a beer. I don't want to have to work at a beer. I don't necessarily need a big IPA. I like brown ales a lot. I mean, I've really been into sours. I think that's the one constant over the last couple few years is that if I can get a good sour, I'm all about it. And again, it's like, well, you're being a hypocrite because you don't want to work your way through an IPA, but you're willing to work your way through a sour. Yes. Why? Because I'm a hypocrite. So, I don't know. I mean, I think that if I'm just going out and I just want to have just a macro beer, I'm going to have a Yingling. And if I want to sit there and I'm going to have something special, I mean, I think that something kind of like in the brown ale genre is what I like.
I've never done any of the sours. Maybe we'll have to do a flight next time we're somewhere because I don't want to pay $8 for a pint of something that I'm not gonna like.
No, you can pay $12 for a flight of something that you're not going to like. We got a great
But
place here. We got two places in Columbus. We've got Pretentious Brewing, which is airport-ish area, and then Antiques on High, which is I really like it. But the only time I went in there, my back went out while I was in there, and now I kind of have a little bit of an aversion of going in there. Jordan Capper asked me about coffee stouts, or yeah. Have you ever had a coffee blonde? Like there's a place in Lancaster that does one. There's a place here in Pickerington that does one, and it's a blonde ale infused with coffee flavors, and they can be really good, but I'm not going to drink 3 or 4 of them, and I just really have very little impulse control. So if I'm going to have a beer, it generally turns into I'm going to have all the beer.
I don't like coffee, so I would not like. I like beer. I don't need something I don't like infused into something I do like. That's like infusing politics into sports. Anyway,
Chicken nugget beer.
yes, Peace Clan here. In and Out is good, but man, I miss me some White Castle. Kevin, you
Wow.
are
Wow. I have not had White Castle since college. And I will just say that has been a decision I've been comfortable with. There are some times where I will see the commercials and I'm like, I remember in college crushing White Castle, but no, but to put that in the same category as In and Out is offensive to me. I am offended, Peace Clan. That hurts me a lot. But to get back to the question from much earlier about how excited am I to go back out to LA for the 2024 UCLA game, going to have to go to the original In and Out in Baldwin Park and maybe take my friends Tom and Tony. I didn't say Gerdeman and Orr. Just Tom and Tony there to show them how an empire was built.
and I believe we're doing 6x6s.
That's my plan. I crushed a 4x4 on one of our eat segments, and the plan was if Ohio State would have gotten to the championship game, that I was going to do a 6x6 and might even be talked into an 8x8. But
What is a 6x6?
6 patties, 6 cheeses, 6 slices of cheese
On two bun on one set of buns.
Yes. So I mean, like an 8x8, I don't know how you can unhinge your jaw. I
That's the
mean,
thing.
it's because it's going to be taller than a Terminator.
Now,
I mean, you have to go, you have to go Dagwood style and like smash it down and like the old cartoons and put in your mouth and then your head goes, like that. I don't know.
Ryan Dawes, of course, says animal style.
Absolutely.
The
The order really too is, and I never think about this because I panic because I'm so excited about being there. I can do without the fries. I really can just do without the fries. I mean, I told my wife went out to LA for work and I don't think she made it. We haven't talked a bunch about all I've heard about is work. I mean, I've not heard about anything else, but I said, skip that and just get like another burger on the side. I mean, or get a shake or something like that. The fries, yes, they were potatoes 4 minutes before, they're served to you or whatever, but There's nothing done with them unless you're going to bring in some Lowry seasoning salt and, maybe some Tony Gerdeman famous European ketchups and things of that nature. The fries are pedestrian.
2 bottles in my holsters, basically, and they're upside down, so they're ready to pour. Once you open them, they are ready.
What about In-N-Out fries with Whataburger spicy ketchup?
Well, I think you can put Whataburger spicy ketchup on anything. It goes with whatever. That would work. I don't really remember the fries. They don't really stick out to me all that much. I am with you though. There's actually fewer calories in another burger than there is in a certain size of fry. So if you're trying to watch what you eat and you want to get a three by three, just get a double, and it's probably fewer calories than a medium fry. So you're doing your heart good. Troy V asks, "Does Tony put ketchup on brisket?"
He better not.
No.
You better not.
No. You put the brisket on the ketchup. You dip it in the ketchup. You don't put it on it. No, you don't put ketchup on stuff. You put stuff in ketchup. What are you talking about? Don't you people know how to eat brisket? Have you never barbecued before? Give me a break. It's just me, Tim 79. How Heinz monopolized ketchup by being the best. That's how anybody monopolizes anything, by being the best or paying off senators.
I was going to say, when you were doing the Buckeye Weekly mailbag or whatever, did you answer my question about what Red Gold has to do to have a better product, or was I denied once again? I'm not a big ketchup fan. I don't dislike ketchup, but at some point when somebody takes such a pro stance on something, the contrarian in me has to put my foot down and say, well, therefore it's crap or whatever. Melinda's, who makes a lot of hot sauces, has a I'm not gonna say really, but a relatively spicy ketchup that is really good. But again, we're getting into these boutique ketchups and things of that nature, as opposed to what you're likely to find when you're out. And we're seeing more and more places going to like the members choice ketchup and things like that, the Gennaro plain wrap Aldi of ketchups, and that's just not, that's not good with me.
I would just like to point out that it is everybody else that brings up ketchup and wants to talk about ketchup. And it is Kevin Noon here who can tell you all of the different kinds of ketchup. So let's just keep that in mind.
It's because I'm thorough. I'm thorough in terms of my dissent. And I'm kind of a you-know-what stirrer as well. But, we'll just leave that to the side.
Robert Sealstead says, Buckeye Bob in Seattle, Buckeye Bob Seattle. Sorry, Kevin, I'll drink you under the table. This sounds like a challenge. And look, if you think you could drink Kevin under the table and you think you can have drink 3 beers in one sitting and do more than Kevin, you're outrageous.
I mean, them's fighting words, but it would have to be done like on a Thursday, because I can't do it on a Friday and then go and have to do pregame, game coverage, post game, everything else. I would just be a mess at that point. But there needs to be a way to be able to put that in there. We need to make sure that we do this in a safe way. No driving, nothing like that. We don't need to have any of that going on. Ample water to stay hydrated, but I'm pretty good at the game of drink. And if I'm given a little
Coors Light to stay hydrated,
there you go. If I'm given a little bit of heads up, because here's the thing, like right now, I don't have a lot of beer in the house. So I've been drinking some bourbon, and I'll pour like 3 fingers of bourbon, and then I'm pretty comfortable at that point. But yeah, if we're gonna go for beer, I need to have a little bit of preparation, just to loosen up my beer muscles.
Several things that I'm trying to get out of here, but some of the for One Piece Clan asks, Tony, ketchup or catsup? It's ketchup. Troy V then says, have you tried Cleveland Ketchup's bacon bourbon ketchup, Tony? It's good stuff. I have not, but I'm going to screenshot this and get that so I can search on that. And then the next question here, as I get this screenshot off of here, Kevin, do we do it in Pasadena after the UCLA game live? Oh, we can't really do anything after a game live. We're working. That's the problem.
We'll be working for about 3 hours. I mean, granted, we will have the benefit of Pacific time and everything else, but still be operating on Eastern time. I mean, but we'll need to
Probably
figure it.
flying back Sunday morning, so we don't really have a lot of time on
Yeah,
road. We
it's
don't never have enough time.
every time that I go on a road trip and I get all these great invites to come to this tailgate and do everything else, and I desperately want to be able to do those things, but there's a lot to do, and on a lot of games, we're in on Friday, and Friday is a travel day, so it's not like we're in like at 8 in the morning on Friday. So we do that. We're wrapped up all day Saturday, and then we're generally out pretty early on Sunday, and especially flying west to east and losing 3 hours and everything else. Let me jump in here really quick on Glass Wing Butterfly. What is my condiment of choice for steak? More steak, obviously. Um, if
Garlic butter.
it, I do like a good compound butter. I do think that that's good. I sometimes will get like the blue cheese crust type situation, or if a like a nice steakhouse has a really nice preparation type thing, I will do that, or I'll do a steak au poivre. But no, I'm certainly not putting ketchup. I'm generally not putting steak sauce unless I'm at like a real low end type of situation. If you're at the Golden Corral and it's steak night there or whatever, I think that just to reapply a little bit of moisture to the steak, you do have to dab some steak sauce on it.
What about the French dip of a steak?
The French dip of a steak.
Like dipping it like a beef sandwich, like an Italian beef sandwich, like dipping it in a jus or something.
I mean, you could sit there and do something like that, with prime rib. With a prime rib, you're dipping it in an au jus and you're doing in the horseradish, but I'm not doing that with a steak. I mean, man, I've got dignity, man. I'm cultured, don't you know?
No, I don't.
No.
This is something I've never thought about, which is something that Ryan Dawes says. I might be able to outdrink Kevin. I consume at 7,700 feet. You never think about the elevation level. We talk about it, when the football teams go and play in Denver or BYU, they like to get there early because of the elevation. How early, like how many days in advance would you need to get there and practice to be ready for this? So drinking at elevation. I've never been in elevation for any length of time as in a Denver airport, for like an hour, and I had to take a nap. But this is something I've never thought about that. I think he's got you here, Kevin.
Well, I don't train at elevation, and like the couple of times that I've been up, like in like the Sierra Nevadas and things like that, I was not of age to drink and was not drinking, so I'm not necessarily sure how I'm not sure what you're gonna be able if I have to come up to the elevation and drink against you, I'm not exactly sure how that's going to affect me, and I'm not sure though if you're coming down to Ohio's elevation or to like a neutral ground. I don't know how much that's going to benefit you.
The
I
beer
mean,
would be so much heavier if he drinks it in Ohio, like weigh you down. It's like being on the moon and then coming to Earth. Like drinking on the moon, you can just go and go and go. Drinking at Earth, that's where things get heavy. I do, yeah, that's an interesting thing. And I had a great point, but I just was distracted. And what you could do, Kevin, to train, get a Anthony Gonzalez oxygen tent and just drink in your tent at like set the elevation at set it at 9,000 feet, as I just saw. Set the elevation there and just drink in your tent and watch watch Netflix or whatever through the plastic screen. I don't know if there's a window or something in those tents.
or you just sit there and you're like, the boy in the bubble or whatever, but you just turn it into you turn it into one of those oxygen tent type situations. I don't know, but I feel pretty comfortable in my ability to hold my own in a drinking competition. There's really only one person on the beat that I would just sit there and say that I couldn't outdrink, and I would die trying. I because I'm not going to back down from a challenge there, but yeah, and Robert says that his ex is from Delaware, Ohio. I'll be there in the fall for a game. We just have to we have to figure out a way to be able to do something to A, put nobody in jeopardy on the road, and B, not to put the shows in the road because I wake up and I'm still drunk. Because that would it's hard enough to do this when you're sober. So maybe not this show, which is very
No.
little, but the pre and post game show does require a little bit more.
Kevin, anything else? Are we about done?
I think we're about done. I told Tony famously as we were getting ready for the show, it's like, now let's try and shoot for an hour or whatever. And we're here at an hour, almost an hour 36. So once again, we're glad to entertain you all. You certainly entertain us because we couldn't do this without y'all. And you guys, I mean, we were able to go through so many topics, football related, drinking related, Ketchup related. It's all there. I'm sure that there's somebody who's just here to talk football who turned us off 30 minutes ago once we started talking about that. And there's some people that are watching. It's like, finally, we're getting to the stuff that I can't get anywhere else.
Yeah. The last half hour of the show is like the Patreon special where we just talk beer, food, and ketchup, which is
it's the fear of the fear of the fear of the Walking Dead or whatever that show that guy does. After
the show within the show. So thank you all for tuning in again. Thank you very much for the super chats. Thank you for the regular chats and just being here to ask us stuff so that we aren't just talking to each other, because I could do that. I could talk to Kevin whenever I want and I don't. So that lets you know how much I want to talk to him. But thank you all for tuning in. Find us at BuckeyeHuddle.com. Become a member. Say hello to us there on the message board. We're always there. And of course, youtube.com/BuckeyeHuddle, Facebook.com/BuckeyeHuddle. Thank you all and have a great weekend.